And many thanks for staying with us. The program is This Morning on ITV, broadcasting from your darling station, independent television located at the hilltop of Mpape district in Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. My name is Iharo Atta. This morning, we want to look at the conflict in the Middle East between the Israeli state and the Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Somewhat, the problem appears to be going beyond what many sees as just an Israeli-Palestinian problem, but that actually affects the whole world. Many persons across the world are speaking for and against. The Congress of the United States debated it somewhat for and against. Some other parts of the world are still speaking. Many persons who thought hitherto that the world did not concern them are already feeling the pinch. Some others as well from Nigeria, sadly, are looking at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from the angle of religion, particularly those persons who really feel, okay, this side is my religion, the other side is. And if you look at comments on the social media, you see that divide. At the moment, Hamas is still talking to us, insisting that all occupied territory by the nation of Israel must be returned, and the occupied West Bank must be free, while the Gaza Strip that is under siege must as well be free. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel is also talking to us that he would push on with the airstrikes as long as, in quote now, necessary. While on the other part, the Prime Minister is also vying to press on to somewhat launch, if need be, a grand offensive or grand incursion into Gaza, having mounted so much of the Israeli war tanks around and called up about 90,000 reservists to join in the fight against Hamas. Somehow, that's not all what it takes here. Even within Israel, for the first time in decades, they are witnessing communal clashes, let me use that language now, in between some settlements. Here we have mixed Jews and Arab settlement. We are seeing clashes between Jews and Arab, one that Benjamin Netanyahu vowed that he would not allow to exist. The United Nations Security Council met yesterday. Somehow, in just the countries that met, many persons did not come out very forceful. I know Tunisia came out very forceful, but big names, big players like Russia and others, really, we are speaking from a point of extreme diplomacy. My name again is Iharo Atta. I have with me international affairs analyst, anti-corruption crusader, and an author, Honorable Ebenezer Oyeta. Can you welcome to our studio, sir?
Good morning, viewers.
Let's start off here with a conversation here. Israel and Palestine. The other time they had, some years back, they had their conflict. You came on board here, we analyzed that, and we thought we are done with that. And now we are seeing intensive escalation of tension in the Middle East here. For this particular crisis, how will you analyze its origin?
Well, it has no different origin from what it has always been. The world leaders, namely United States, Britain, France, China, and Russia, they are playing unnecessary diplomacy with human's life. They are playing unnecessary diplomacy with human's life. Now, the source of all of this conflict is that we need to ask some certain fundamental question. The modern state of Israel was established in 1948 through occupation that was orchestrated by Western powers. That was after the victory of the Second World War. Now, and they gave latitude to Israel to keep on expanding their frontier. Today, I can tell you vividly that Israel is the only country in the entire world that have no defined borders. Any president of Israel or prime minister can wake up and say, I am going to annex so segment, and I'm going to build some 10,000 settlements for it, and that kind of a thing. And Before you see it, it is taking place. Then US will won, even when they don't meant it. Britain will won. European Union will speak against Israel. But in the night, they are doing different things. In the day, they do different things. There are more than 14 resolutions against Israel.
Okay, now, we'll come to that now. We're talking about the long-run crisis here. Let's look at the one that really sparked up this crisis here. The issue of the raid at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Do you think Benjamin Netanyahu claiming that he wants to secure acted properly? Do you think that is sufficient enough to provoke Hamas, who is in Gaza, for firing rocket into some other part of southern Israel, Ashkelon, others, and even hitting part of Tel Aviv?
The truth of the matter is that it has been allowed that, that particular mosque, I think, is the third holiest Islamic site in the world. And Israel is Judaism. So if you decided to take custody of an holy site of another religion that they considered part of their own entity, definitely you are looking for conflict.
But Israel considered it part of its territory.
Now, the truth of the matter is that is why even in Israel today, they never anticipate that kind of a communal eruption that is happening between the Palestinian, what do you call it?
Jews and the Arabs.
That is the Jews and the Arabs. That is, and most of the Arabs, they consider themselves by citizens as Israeli. Yes, those that are fighting right now inside various cities in Israel. They never expected such a backslash. Because in Israel, you have 74 point something Jews and practicing Judaism. Then you have 17.2% of Muslim. Then 2% of Christian and things of that nature. So they have entered into themselves. The world should be pragmatic enough, decisive enough, and truthful enough based on the resolutions that the world understood the fact and have so declared it in the resolution that some part of the Palestine that are being occupied by Israel are illegal. If the world so declared this illegal, they should also have mechanism to implement their resolutions. If you don't implement such resolutions, this conflict will always, result to conflagration, then it will subside, and we'll keep it for another 2-3 years. It will erupt again, and that is what we have been experiencing for so long. It is most unfortunate.
Okay, now, I'm looking at it from the standpoint here of what is going on currently on the ground here. The clamor for cessation of hostilities. That means that they need to de-escalate the amount of attention in that particular region now, that everybody must actually withdraw, stop what they're doing. The issue is, who stopped first? The peace talk. How successful will it be?
Even the United Nations Security Council that was held yesterday, you can see how tumultuous it is. And it is not reaching out to any visible solution, concrete solution as of now, because they are divided among themselves. No one wants to speak to the truth. And it is, it was Madame Fodio that said, conscience is an open wound. Only the truth can heal it. The Israeli and Palestinian issues is an open wound. Except the world take a concrete step to address it in form of justice, truth, and uprightness, we will keep on revolving around these particular cycles. And the political entity called Israel has come to appear as a project of the West. That is why
they also got some support from Russia.
No, apart from the support from Russia, because all those countries house Jews. You have Russian Jews, you have Iranian Jews, you have that kind of. So
China did not speak so firmly yesterday.
So the truth of the matter is that they understood the fact that The shortcoming is from the world leaders. That is the powerful nations of the world who are not willing. They did diplomatically, they do something, they say something in the morning and they do a different thing in the night. And that is the reason why that conflict will never have a solution. Now, the United States spent more than 200 billion revolvingly dollars on Israel armament alone annually and things of that nature. Why this massive investment when you know that there is no free lunch anywhere? It is intended to oil the machines of war that we keep the imperialist representation of the state of Israel and the rest of it. It was for the purpose of Israel the United States destroyed Iraq. It is for the purpose of Israel, the United States is dreading Iran, Lebanon, and all of those places and things of that nature. Then the question is, what is the representations of the political Israel? Those who are looking at it from the point of religion and the rest of it, they are just making the mistake, a very big mistake. We must look these issues at the point of humanism. The victims we are creating, the victims of war we are creating, revolvingly whenever this spark comes up. Until the world look at it like that and have respect for human's life, that conflict will continue like that. The Israelis have the right to live, but they must have a defined border. I am saying it repeatedly again, Israel is the only country in the entire world that have no defined border. Once you don't have defined border, you will always live in the hunger of annexation, and that is imperialism. And there will always be resistance to that. And whenever there are resistance to that, there will be conflicts. Unfortunately, the Hamas are fighting with knife, stones, and whatever they call rockets. But Israel have what it takes to even annihilate them if it is possible, and things of that nature.
Okay,
and
now
the world is dancing
now
it.
some of the problems the world looks at, which have drawn some sympathy for the persons in Gaza, is the high mortality rate, let me call it, high fatality rate here in Gaza here. And Israel have said, look, as far as they are concerned, they always give 1 hour warning also, but Hamas is using them as human shield. What can be done? Should the world continue? Should the war continue to actually ensure that we don't have too much of civilian casualties on both sides?
There is no way that no war that you will not have civilian casualties, but it is a war crime for people, fighters, to make civilian a deliberate target by making them a human shield. And you know, for example, many of the commanders of the Hamas that were killed, they were killed in the midst of people because they took shelter in the midst of people, and you know what that meant, because many innocent people will have to die.
But how come Israel knew exactly what room they are, what houses they stay?
There are sophisticated intelligence in Israel, and the Israel have the capacity to penetrate your country effectively. You have seen that even with the whole defense system and technological growth of Islamic Republic of Iran. Whenever the Israelites decided to take out one particular scientist in charge of their nucleus and their kind of, they get them very easily because they will purchase, and they are not doing it alone. They have frontier that network, the frontiers of the CIA and M16 and the rest of it and Mossad. They work together so they can easily penetrate your intelligence network and pinpoint. And also, they have a stronger technology spying mechanism that can actually domicile those escape routes of the Palestinian people. So we are talking about war, but honestly, a war ought to be a thing of a balance, this thing, but the disparity between the war between Israel and Palestine it cannot be considered as a war.
Okay, while we look at that, the other question that comes to mind is the issue of let's look at the armament now. The Gaza Strip is under siege. Let me use that word now. Whatever goes to Gaza Strip, likely apart from the Egyptian border and some other part, are likely scrutinized by Israel. Should they allow them to go in? But yet, rocket launchers gets in. Yet tunnels are there. Yet rockets get in, and ammunition gets in very strongly.
Well, that is the nature of resistance. They have become accustomed to resistance. You block their water, you block this front, you block that front. They kept on devising a way. And you will be very shocked at the resilience, their capacity to drill an underground system of, you say you bomb this tunnel today, they will open another 2, 3 tomorrow and the rest of it. And they also have their own alliances. They have their own alliance, and the alliance is broad. So
somehow finger points to Qatar and Bahrain.
Well, Qatar and Bahrain are involved, but beyond that, the strongest support is Iran. The strongest support base is Iran. And Iran also have a very strong and formidable, what do you call it, intelligence network. And they have a way of devising things. If not for Iran, particularly, if not for Iran intelligence and things of that nature, like somebody like President Assad of Syria would have fallen, and that kind of a thing. So this fight is a fight, a political fight as well as economic fight to control a certain region. And for the Western power, Israel is that front that we keep on checkmating the excesses of both Iran, Hezbollah, and things of that nature. They call it excesses and the rest of it. They would have wanted to see the way they have taken out Iraq. Iraq is no longer constituting a formidable blockade to Israel. They would have wanted to see Iran taken out. But Iran has created a massive front which consists of Hezbollah, the Palestinian resistance mechanism, and they are funding them so seriously and things of that nature. And that is why, until the world take pragmatic step and define it that, look, Israel have the right to live, but within a defined border and peaceably. And Palestinians have the right to live.
Why do we look for peace? The question here is, what will be the state of Jerusalem? Because that appears to be one of the cardinal points of worry. What will be the state of Jerusalem? The Israelis are saying that is the city of David, they go nowhere. The Palestinians are saying they got a holy site there, they go nowhere, particularly in East Jerusalem. Why those in the Christian faith globally still see Jerusalem as some of the place where Jesus Christ was killed and lived part of his life.
You see, those are historical facts. The question we should ask ourselves, why is it that most of the land that we considered the biblical lands, including Bethlehem,
is in Palestine?
They are in Palestine. So, historically speaking, there have been oscillations through conquest. Jerusalem sometimes was even under Ottoman Empire, that is the Turkish, today's Turkish, and things of that nature. So there have been conquests left and right, the Roman Empire and things of that nature. And whomsoever conquer a place, declare the place his inheritance, and the rest of it until there is another superior power that will come and that kind of a thing. So historically speaking, the issue of Jerusalem can only be resolved through judicial system that concretely examine history. It cannot be based on David's city's this thing alone. It cannot be based on that. Before it became David's city,
the Jebusites were there.
Yes, who were the owner
the
and things of those nature and that kind of a thing. Then you will ask yourself, who are the Jebusites today? Those are some of the questions that historians will have to resolve.
But who
thing.
listens to the historians now? Who will listen now?
The world know the truth. We have archaeologists, we have, what do you call this, different level of historical excavations and things of that can trace all of these things. And I think a lot of tracing had been made, and it is true alignment to historical perspective that made the United States to be, the United Nations to be able to draw up almost about 14 resolutions, all of which were against Israel. But they have no political will and truth to implement those resolutions.
Go ahead.
For example, when a resolution is passed against a country, such as Libya and the rest of it in those days, you see how the entire United Nations workforce will move and immediate enforcement. But no single resolution against Israel has been enforced. So humanism in us should demand us to ask, why is it that any resolution against Israel are not being implemented?
But the resolutions against Israel, are they largely supported? Or is it just a momentary pressure when you have a case like the one we are having now? They just put pressure on Israel, America, China, Russia, Great Britain, France are endorsed, most time with America frowning and being forced to do so, and everyone disappears. And when they finish, everything is thrown to the wind. And Israel had said, hey guys, I got nothing to do with ICC. Don't count me there. You can't try anybody in Israel.
The truth of the matter is that all of them know what they are doing. For example, you see the new Secretary of State, United States Secretary of State, initially, out of the spirit of humanism and, of course, of some of the knowledge he had about Israel and Palestinian war, came out blowing hot against Israel. Then Israel took offense and immediately spoke tough against the United States and things of that nature. Then immediately the authority, the bloc, called the Secretary of State to order and things of that nature. These are the things. No one wants to stand up for the truth vehemently. But the what do you call triumph of human spirit demands that even if you have to be alone, you should be able to stand upon the truth. It is only in truth we can have concrete resolutions that can lead to peace. But if you keep on creating contrived realities in order to deceive people in the afternoon and you do another things in the night, the conflict will remain indelible. It will remain an open wound. And that is exactly what the conflict between Israel and Palestine has become, an open wound that is demanding for the world to stand by the truth and resolve that matter once and for all.
Now, if you're just joining us, the program is This Morning on ITV. We are speaking with Honorable Ebenezer Oyetakin. We are looking at the Israel-Palestinian conflict that has claimed so much lives here. Now, the problem, while we look at this, look at the need for peace in the Middle East here. The problem of a two-state solution, how workable is it? Many are trying to throw the map just on the table and look at somewhat Ramallah, another West Bank city. On the other side, you pass through some Israeli states, then you get to the West Bank. How will you run these two cities side by side? And will Israel give up Jerusalem? Or will the two cities, although I have not seen the resolution here, will West Bank exist on its own under Hamas control, or will the PLO exist on its own on the other side of Ramallah and others in the occupied West Bank?
What is expected of the two-state creations that had been in play, a recommended solution for more than 2 to 3 decades, but not seen the light of the day, would have seen part of Jerusalem, the East Jerusalem, conceded to the Palestine, and the West Jerusalem conceded to the Israel.
Will Israel leave the Wailing Wall?
And the rest of it.
Will Israel leave its Wailing Wall? That's the question.
But that is what the Israel don't want to subscribe to. And because Israel is not subscribing to it, and Israel has a rope on the neck of most major powers of the world.
Because the question here is if because when we discuss that, we have religion claiming holy sites here. Israel have their most holy site, the Wailing Wall, the remnant of the ancient temple they claim to be of King Solomon, while the Palestinians have their own, the third holiest site in Islam here. No matter what it is here, this war of holy site located almost in the same place. Almost in the same, just in the same few small location.
If the world powers sees their extreme armament build up for Israel and demand in the spirit of humanism that let Israel live in peace within this defined border and let the Palestinians live in peace within this defined border. Let the two countries have access to this, their holy site, in a give and take spirit. This is the only direction at which they can arrive at peace. Any other things short of that will continue to revolve the conflict.
Are they willing to?
Because I extensively, on one occasion personally, discussed with late Muammar Gaddafi over the questions of the two states, because he is one of the strongest proponents of the two-state solution and things of that nature. And the way he put it convinced me that it can actually work, but the Israelites are not willing to go the two states of a thing, because when another dimension at which you can understand it is during this attempt to overthrow, the Syrian government, to dismember the Syrian nation and things of that nature, and render it exactly what they have done to Iraq, not forgetting that Golan Heights, which is a Syrian territory, continue to be a territory of Israel to today. So when you take
they're not willing to let go.
They are not willing to let go.
Because
despite all resolution against it.
I know I had asked them when I was there at the Golan Heights.
So the reason why they are not going to let
the Golan Heights is too strategic to Israel security.
Now,
that anyone who stays at the Golan Heights sees the whole of Israel. So they will never give the Golan Heights back to the Syrians.
That is what we are talking about. And when they wanted to overthrow Assad, President Assad, you see that they never invaded with regular army. They created ISIS. And when they create ISIS as a terror group and things of that nature, they started funding them. Whenever ISIS suffer painful defeat and the rest of it, particularly when Israel and Iran when Russia and Iran stepped in, the victims of war of ISIS are evacuated into Israel for treatment. Those kind of, and when you see the acronym of ISIS, the Islamic movement, whatever you call it, Levant.
Oh, in terms of Iraq and Syria.
Syria. So when you look at it, Levant is area that covered River Tigris and River Euphrates, and all of these rivers move straight down into the heart of Iraq. So what they are saying is that all of this territory, till we will get to Nineveh, they are land of the that must be occupied.
Now, let's come in quickly as our time flies here. Are we seeing any push, any strong reality about peace coming very shortly? Because Netanyahu is still insisting he wants to go in with the ground troop, while some are warning him that the casualties may mount in terms of the Israeli army and the reservists they have called in. Are we seeing any real sense of peace coming very quickly?
It is most unfortunate that it is not very clear as of now. But if the world know if they truly value peace, they must concretely move to have peace, and immediately. They should not allow the ground forces invasion, because if the ground forces invasions take place as the Israel are proposing, what will happen would be that there will be interventions that we classically drew in fighting force like Hezbollah, and once Hezbollah entered, the entire nation.
Will Lebanon be spared? Whenever Hezbollah comes in, Lebanon feels the heat.
Yes.
The pounding will be at Lebanon.
The pounding will increase, but some times ago, the balance were...
Because the last fight with Hezbollah...
The disparity within the balance was very terrible some times ago. For example, about 2 decades ago, when Israel will kill about 400 people in Palestine, there may probably be no single casualty in Israel. But right now, the casualty is increasing by the day in Israel and the rest of it, though the disparity is still much and that kind of a thing. And yet, Hezbollah has not entered. The rocket that is being used in Gaza, these are just to say we will keep our resistance. If the true war comes, you will have guided ballistic missiles.
But what about
Hezbollah have guided
what
ballistic
about the US
missile.
and other allies?
Then,
we don't pray for that.
No, that is why I am worried.
When the war comes, everyone...
That is why I am worried that it won't do anybody
Everyone will feel the heat. But quickly now, before I let you go, just a few minutes here. This morning we talked about the fact that we are pushing too much on the Israel-Palestinian war and not leaving the one in the African shore. The Tigray war is claiming more lives. Far, far more lives than what we see in Israel and Palestine. But everyone is looking at Israel, while the Tigray standing in between, submerged or sandwiched in between Eritrea and Ethiopia, where many persons can't even come and can't even go in, and yet no one is looking at that. Somebody said the African journalists are not doing their job.
Apart from African journalists not doing enough to report on those wars, the African Union is so passive. It appeared that with the death of Gaddafi, the African Union lost their bite, lost their color, and lost their potency and ability to convene and quickly resolve issues. And once the African Union sleeps over it, the African journalists will automatically sleep over it. It's not supposed to be so, but honestly, that is what we are having. And it is most unfortunate. The carnage that is going on in Tigray is uncalled for. Yes, any country, any region of a particular country that quickly demand. That is why we should be careful about our agitation for secession in Nigeria. If you declare unilateral secession and you will have to define your border all by yourself, and things of that nature, then you will incur the wrath. And one would have thought that it is only the wrath of Ethiopia Tigray will incur, but the wrath of Eritrea seems to be more biting on them than Ethiopia. And this has to do with territorial integrity.
Territorial struggle.
Struggle. Yes, because you see, sovereignty are licensed to kill all over the world. To kill and to destroy in order to
I think thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Thank you for coming. We shall we'll pray for peace. We'll pray for global peace in Israel-Palestine, in Tigray, and we'll pray for peace across the world, even in Nigeria. We'll pray
That's
for peace.
What we need.
And we want those persons who are celebrating the war to please understand that peace is priceless.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a break now.